free capital campaigns, she would have thought they were not, as I say in my friends in South say, not right in the head. But she said she's done 3 and she's so pleased with that. She's particularly pleased with their current sanctuary and recent construction they did in her home community, her home church, and she gets to enjoy that every week. So, without further ado, on behalf of the board and the ministering staff and us in the congregation, I'd like to welcome Kay Crider for her presentation.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be with you this weekend, and then I've spent a fair bit of time in advance of the weekend talking to folks via Zoom video in this age of technology. So why don't we go ahead and get started here, and since Deborah already worked from back there, so let's see.
Is it on?
It is on. I tested it, but I tested it back there, so it's closer.
This is common mistake. It's actually.
Oh, that worked. Okay.
Go through your stuff.
What did you do?
I don't want to change it.
So, Reverend Sean's magic touch. Perfect. Okay. So, Deborah just told you several things, so I'll kind of skip through that. I'm part of a team of consultants that used to be managed by the UUA, and the person retired who is used to head that program, and they didn't fill their position, so more of us are just, or not more of us, less of us are actually doing this work. There's 5 of us on our team that do it, and then we just take the intake calls when the congregation calls and ask for some assistance. So there's 5 of us, all of us are dedicated UUs, and so we know what it's like to be part of our faith movement, as well as know what it's like to be a congregant and be in your shoes when you're working on a campaign or working on a stewardship drive for your annual programs. So that's enough about me, and there it goes. But Reverend Sean does have the magic touch. So I've been here since Friday, and again, you heard about my meetings. I'm going to provide some input and some options for you, and some feedback on the current state of the congregation, and then some recommendations and suggestions about how you can move forward. So to get to the meat of it, you did see this the strength slide. I think, or I can't remember if I was trying to limit the number of slides for the service. So this one talks about the minister and the staff being your greatest strength, and then your Sunday services, and being welcoming and inclusive, and the community and the people and the music. Those are all right up there in terms of what makes this community what it is, and so that's a great sign. We're doing well and have a loving community here together. So I asked the question on the electronic survey, and let me just mention again, if you didn't hear during the service, that survey is still open. So it'll be open for this week. If you haven't had a chance to take it, feel free to go online. It takes 3 minutes, although some of your congregants told me it only took them 2 minutes. So quick too. It's 5 questions, and we're just trying to take the temperature. Answer honestly. Use loving language if you make a comment, but you could speak your mind. And so take that survey if you haven't yet. I'll keep it open all this coming week. Top priorities that your survey said, and I asked you to name the top 3 priorities. 69% of you, so more than 2/3 said membership growth. 67%, again, more than 2/3 said facilities improvement as one of your top 3 priorities. So diversity, 33%, expanding volunteer base, 29%, social justice, 27%, and Sunday services, 23%. So this just reflects what people chose as their top 3 priorities for this congregation moving forward. And it looks a bit different in every congregation, right? These numbers aren't the same. In fact, sometimes they're radically different than this. So, all right, and oops, too quick here. All right, hopes for growth. So this is showing how you're feeling about growth here. So sometimes at a congregation, again, that green piece of the pie is larger because folks are just happy with the way things are, and not that you're unhappy here, but you would like a space that feels more like a sanctuary on Sundays, and then a space, I heard lots of stuff over the weekend about what you would do with your sanctuary on other days of the week, right? because we don't build a sanctuary just for Sunday morning, right? So movie series, community events, speaker series, bringing folks in from the wider community so that you can let them know about you, but also just welcome them for people who would come in from the community, whether they become members or not, and see what you're all about and have a space for that here. So there was a tie between people who wanted 5% growth and people who wanted 10% growth. 47% chose 5% growth and 10% chose 47% growth as well. So, sorry, 47% chose 10% growth. Yeah, 47% growth, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah. Although you'd have to ramp up your staff very quickly if you got that many more congregants right away.
Scary.
So one of our former consultants who's now retired, fabulous woman, Frankie Price Stearns, she did a scatter graph of a 10-year growth of congregations, and she was a retired IBM statistician, so can you, Steve, get rid of that for me? It's not a big deal, I don't know what it says, but I don't have.
Trust it.
Yes, trust it, yes, okay. So, trust you. So she did a scatter graph, and 5% is really the kind of growth that most congregations, if they're growing, that's the more achievable thing. Sometimes congregations can get more than 10% of growth a year, but that's less common. So, but it's good that you have this many people who are interested in welcoming other folks here. So, I don't know if we lost trust. There we go. Okay, so support for the campaign. So this last question on here asked in 4 different ways if you could support the capital campaign with a financial gift. And 9 people said, who responded, or 17% of respondents said, at 10 p.m. last night, 52 of you had completed the survey. So 9 people said, 17%, yes, I will make a new pledge that I have not had a chance yet to make a gift to the capital campaign. 14 people said, or 27% said, yes, I will increase my pledge to the capital campaign for a new sanctuary. 16 people said, or 31% said they've already pledged and they can't increase their pledge. And 6 people, or 12%, said they cannot increase their pledge or they need more info. And so there were comments at the bottom of all these questions that I asked, and I will include all those in the written report that I have for the congregation 2 weeks after I leave. So, and at any time, if you have a question, we do have a roving mic named Betts, I understand. Is that correct, Steve? Who, if you have a question, so you just want to wait to ask your question until the mic gets to you, if you have one. So again, still more time to fill out the survey. Okay, so here are your annual pledge for this current program year. I'd just like to let folks know what that is. So your average pledge is $1,941 from your congregation. That's a bit above average. When we took the average of the bulk of congregations, when we take out the really high congregations and the really low congregations in terms of the large size congregations, sometimes have a lower number, because they have what's called more consumer members, not in a derogatory way, but it's harder. It's easier if you have 800 members for people that come in on Sunday and then sneak out and not be involved, and so their numbers tend to be different. And sometimes in a small congregation, the numbers are lower as well. So this is the average from last year when we crunched the numbers for all congregations between about 150 members and 500 members was about 1,700. I have been to 2 congregations this year whose average pledge was above 3,000, even when I took out the top pledge. So some congregations are like, it's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. You were still above average though with your 1941, which is still great. Your median pledge is 1,000. That means that's the midpoint pledge, right? So we look at that because we're interested in what that means in terms of how the pledges are distributed. And so that's about average for what the median pledge is. I did go to a congregation this year whose median pledge is $2,000, so I was like, wow, that's, that was great. So anyway, just to give you an idea, some folks have no idea kind of what that is, and of course there's a big range of pledges, as one might guess, in your congregation, just like every other congregation. So, capital campaign nuts and bolts, so Steve is helping me out, it sounds like. Thank you, Steve. So these are just the nuts and bolts for a capital campaign. You want compelling vision and plan for your programs in your building. You all are rocking and rolling with Reverend Sean and Reverend Judy and Beth and everyone who's working on your, as professional staff for your congregation. And you have a plan for your sanctuary to add on to this facility. You get to skip the part about stay or go, right? For those of you who are here when you had your other location, you know what that's about. But you know, it took my current congregation, I guess 3 tries. I wasn't there for the first 2 to figure out that they really could do it and move from their former place to the current place we're in. So it's a hard thing, right? Change is hard, and everyone has their memories of their particular place, but you get to skip that here because you already have a lovely spot here, and you can build on here, so you have space to do that. So you have consensus on your path forward, so folks are excited. And when I say consensus, it's hard to have 100% agreement on everything, right? It's just like life, as we heard today from the reading. It can be messy. It took me till I was about 45 to learn that. I somehow was in denial that life could be messy, right? So supermajority consensus is, you know, I would say 80% or more of folks just really excited about your path forward. And you have an engaged congregation with low conflict. So sometimes I show up and there's some grumbling and conflict and other things going on. So you don't really want to launch a capital campaign when you have that going on. You'd like to get that resolved first, but I didn't see or hear anything about that. You have healthy annual stewardship. Again, as you heard Reverend Sean, there was a $70,000 deficit in the budget when she arrived, and now you're in the black, and you've been operating in the black, so you're doing a great job on that as well. And people willing to make it happen. So you heard, or you saw some people standing up in the service today about, you know, your board and your property use group, your capital campaign team. There's lots of people working on this, including your staff, to help make this happen. So you have that going for you as well. So, well, great. So guidelines, this one might be animated, see if, okay, but looks like it might be working. So, I put this up here during the service as well, but typically we see congregations 3 to 5 times their annual giving, and that's like a 20-year, you know, typical thing. So for you, that's, since you have about $186,000 in annual giving, $560,000 to $950,000, which is, you know, $500,000 to $1 million. That's a big range, right? What does that mean for you? So you're right now, you are about at 3 times. So some outlier congregations just in the last couple of years, 9.75 times, 8 times, 6.5 times, there's another 7 times their annual giving in the last couple of years. It's not typical, but it is doable. So those are actual congregations that have you know, been there, done that, and raised that much in relationship to their annual giving. And they're all different sizes of congregations. So kudos to you as well. You know, you saw the 1953 up there in the service about when you started, and I helped the congregation a couple of years ago who started in 1958 and just got their new building dedicated, you know, in May of last year. So you're doing great, and they're doing great as well. But you know, different timeline, right, that you have. So 8.1 times your annual giving gives you that $1.5 million, which is the price tag for your sanctuary. And of course, when you think about $1.5 million, you hear everything. Just, you know, we know there's lots of variety of views. You've got, oh my goodness, that's a huge amount of money, and other people are like, wow, what a good deal for $1.5 million, given the cost of things here. You know, in Southern California, I grew up here, so I know a little bit about what the real estate market is like. So but you know, it does feel like a lot. But if you all get together, then you can actually, you know, get there in terms of everybody contributing what they can. So if you put a loan, a reasonable sized loan, with your gifts, and you get a grant from your Spirit Foundation, you might be able to get up to $200,000 from them, depending on how they're feeling and what their other priorities are. And then you raise $1 million. That's 5.2 times your annual giving. So that's feels doable. And I know you say, well, okay, easy for you to say, okay, but I've been in a lot of congregations, so I do think that you know, I'm not giving you a pie in the sky thing. This is actually a doable thing. It's rare for congregations to embark on a building project and not have some amount of debt. We don't want you to go in too much debt, though, which is why I have this recommendation, and I'll show you what the loan scene looks like and what those calculations look like in a minute. because part of it is, you wanna plan well, so that's what, part of my visit, just gives you some baseline to look at. So, again, you're almost at 3 times your annual giving, with what people have pledged so far, with just half your congregation pledging. So that is great. And so to get to your goal gift level, so if you wanted to raise $1.5 million, no debt and no grant, then $300,000 is that 15 to 20% anchor gift. And some people say, oh, good grief, like, that seems like a huge amount of money. It is a lot of money, but I do see that happening at congregations that are making their building projects happen, and that's really the way the gift chart looks, whether you're raising $50 million or $1 million or $500,000, that 15 to 20% of that top goal is really what's needed. So if you decided to do a loan and a grant, in addition to your pledges, and wanted to get to $1 million, then that top anchor gift is $200,000, so much less than $300,000, right? And then if you had a $750,000 goal, and I'm not suggesting you shoot for that goal, but then $150,000 would be your lead gift. So can you get a spirit level grant? I know folks have been looking into that, and so you need to be at a particular point in your project before you're allowed to apply, but that money is out there and available for folks who apply and meet their criteria. So we don't have any indication that there's something that would be a barrier for you to get that. And then a loan, do you want to do that? Debt, I grew up with debt is a 4-letter word. Some of those, the pictures that Reverend Sean showed, my dad is a lovely, lovely man. He's very elderly now, he's 90, but when he was young, he was very poor. And so he doesn't like antiques and other things, and debt was definitely a bad word in our house, right? You don't want to have any debt. But really, to get where you want to go, a reasonable, practical amount of debt is often the case that congregants vote on for their congregation to get where they want to go, because making a leap, involves usually some level of that. And again, we just want you to do that at a level that is able to be part of your budget. So, gift chart for, I think we skipped over, there we go. Here's the gift chart for 1.5 million. So it just shows you what kind of gifts are needed in those categories. This is what a typical gift chart would look like if you were to get to $1.5 million. And then on the right, just with half the congregation pledging, you see where your gifts are so far. And so, having folks stretch, and I was asked this weekend, what do you mean, Kay? You keep talking about these stretch gifts. What does that mean? And well, stretch means that you think about what you think you can give, and then you stretch and give some more, right? That's what it takes to get these projects done. You heard Deborah say that, I did say if somebody had told me what I was going to give for capital campaigns when I was in my 20s, I would have said, oh, good grief, I can't, that's ridiculous. But again, so happy with the end result, and that's part of my legacy, since I raised my kids in the UU church that other people had built, and so now all the kids that are in the church now, where I am, I'm helping that happen, and then when I'm gone, it'll still be there for some other people's kids and adults, right? Because we know there's a lot of multi-gen here at our congregation, so it's for everybody. So gift chart for 1 million is, this is what it looks like with the number of gifts needed in each category, and then how many that you have right now. So again, looking at this, you can look at these gift charts more in my written report, but this is just to give you an idea of what it looks like if you've got the anchor gifts and the ones that fill in below. Again, if you had all 95 pledging households who could each give $10,000, you'd be able to raise your $1 million right away, but that's not the way the world works, right? There's a variety of capacity out there, and the church is for everybody, and so everybody stretches to the best of their ability to do what they can. All right, and so one of the ways, well, not one of the ways, the way that I recommend that you do an additional ask for this is to have a stewardship conversation. And what does that look like? People are like, oh, someone's gonna come to my house and ask me for money, right? Ew. But it's actually a great experience and a chance to get to know other people. If you're meeting somebody for coffee, and it doesn't have to be at someone's house, but it can be, and you're finding out, if I'm meeting with Tom, I'm asking Tom, tell me about a day in the life of Tom. What's that about? And then you hear about what the day in the life of Kay is about. And then we talk about what's meaningful to you, and I have VUU in there, I apologize, it should say UUC. So what's meaningful to you, you might actually be excited about Valley Unitarian as well, but so it was late last night, sorry about that. So we'll fix it before we send it to you. So what's meaningful to you about this congregation, and why you really want this sanctuary project to happen? Great on Sundays, great for community events, great for outreach, great for rentals, lots of different things that can be done when you have a different space. So, and then at the last part, it is really the last 10 minutes of an hour is the part where you're talking about the confidential pledge. And again, it can be done in confidence. Sometimes people ask for help in looking at the gift chart, or they ask for help in filling out the form. But again, that's the tiny piece. And sometimes you go and have a visit, and it's a wonderful visit, and someone is unable to pledge. And that's, the church is here for them as well. So it's, even if somebody says, don't come visit me, I can't give, you say, I'd love to come visit you anyway, right? And have that connection. So I just plant that seed for you. I know you haven't done individual stewardship conversations for a while, and I fully admit I'm a stewardship geek, so I like meeting with people. But a lot of you, you don't have to be an extrovert to do these meetings and have them be a meaningful connection. So next time I'm at the grocery store, if I've met Tom, I have a deeper connection, or I see him across the sanctuary, I have a deeper connection. There's the part of that conversation is really what is, you're building community when you do this. So, so I just say, please be receptive to a visit. So these, when I say stewards, and for your congregation, I know you have stewards that are stewarding your endowment and your finances. So a capital campaign steward or an annual campaign steward are the kind of stewards that I'm referencing here. And again, there's no arm twisting, just good conversation. And it's even a good conversation when someone's sharing what's heavy on their heart, right? You heard some of the joys and sorrows today, so it's a lot like that, except for you get more detail because you're talking to them and being in community with them. So welcome that time together, and please be receptive to a visit. So a potential loan, what does that look like? So some debt, as I said, for a big project is often necessary. You decide as a congregation what you think is good. So my guidelines for that are a little bit lower than what the UUA would say, but I'll tell you where that 25% of your annual budget. So your annual budget's around $400,000, and so 25% of that going to debt service is a lot, right? And so I don't recommend that. That's the threshold the UUA has if they're going to loan you money. But you can usually get a little bit better deal from a local bank. So the UUA is not in the business of gouging. It's more they have money to loan, but they're not in the business of loans. So they just have a little admin cost added on. So my recommendation for this, a realistic guideline, is no more than 15% of your annual budget to go into debt service. That's more absorbable by congregations. If someone's going to go up to that 25%, that would be in a situation in my mind where they already have some debt built into their budget already, and then they're taking that additional amount on, so that the increase is no more than 15%. Or if it's a bridge loan period during construction, where you're then going to pay back that extra amount, that 10% above the 15%, when all your pledges come in. So those are the what I consider practical but ambitious parts of the loan. So if you had a $250,000 loan, that would be about $20,000 a year in debt service. That's 5%. And if you You could even go above that if you wanted to. I just picked that figure. If you reached $1 million in terms of your campaign, and then you took out a $350,000 loan, and then you got $150,000 from the Spirit Level Foundation grant, then that would get you to your 1.5 million. So you decide as a congregation, thinking about what these guidelines are. So your budget does contain some substantial rental income, and so you have to figure out a plan for what you want to do during construction. If you have reduced rent during that time, do you have a bridge loan for that? I had a congregation recently where somebody gifted the amount of lost rental income to the congregation to use during their building project. And for you, I think it's about $140,000, but I will call on any of the finance folks to correct me, but I think I'm getting a few nods. So there's different ways to do that for the displaced income while you're doing your construction project. So compliments that I gave you during the service, but I'll say them again here. Again, having a settled, well-loved minister is really a blessing and a gift. And you have that with Reverend Sean. You have a balanced budget, which is also excellent. Strong community with low conflict. That again, these projects can feel a little scary and daunting, but they are doable. And so sometimes we don't always bring our best selves in our conversations if we're a little anxious about something. And so starting out with the kind of strong bonds and strong community that you have in low conflict is great. You have this beautiful campus here. Many congregations I visit would love to have this much acreage and love to have this much parking and love to have this much bathroom facilities. So there's many lovely things about it. Lots of good RE rooms, and you've got office space, and you have this space that would become an additional meeting space, but for your fellowship hall that you can use after services. So just a fabulous campus. So yeah, growing RE with very experienced leadership. You're lucky to have Reverend Judy to be heading that up, and growing adult faith formation programs with half the congregation. So one of the things that we know what's special to us about our congregations is the connections that we make with each other. And so just to call out a couple things that people mentioned, there was a dinner last night that somebody bought at the auction for 16 folks, and people were really looking forward to that. And somebody else mentioned the grow your own theology. I'm getting it wrong.
Build your own.
Build your own. Oh, right. Yeah, theology, like big questions, right? So even if you don't want to build your theology, right, asking the big questions, right? So that was also something that somebody mentioned this weekend as part of what was really meaningful to them, even though they said, not surprisingly for you, I didn't really build my own theology, but I made a lot of good connections. So, and thriving music ministry, people have been really complimentary of Beth, and I complimented her. I was noticing in the end, before the service started, she was just playing Spirit of Life and carrying on a full conversation with somebody, so like that.
Yeah, we were commenting on that. Bob and I were
that's a gift. So it was just, I was just amazed by that, right? I can tootle along on the piano with that, that spiral bound thing open, but I definitely need to concentrate. So impactful social justice work as well. That's a part of our 7 principles and what we like to do in terms of outreach. And this is not a list of all of it, but just a couple things that people had mentioned this weekend was the LGBTQA+ and the Environmental Film Festival. So there's much more than that, but lots of compliments. Occasionally, and again, this is not meant as a bad thing about other congregations, but I'm up on Saturday night thinking, all right, I've got 3 things. What else can I say that's good and complimentary? And for you, it's like, can I fit all these on the slide? I'm gonna have to reduce the font size. So really, you're doing really well, so congratulations with that. So some observations, you heard this before from Reverend Sean. If you're 80% full on Sundays, it's not welcoming for newcomers. Not everybody's an extrovert who wants to come sit in the front row. Some of us have been shamed for doing that in school, when we were young. raise my hand there, you probably go sit in the front row, you know, so, but most people, that's not their preferred thing when they're gonna visit a church, so, so just thinking about what's welcoming for newcomers. And right now, about half the congregation has pledged for the capital campaign, and in order to get where you wanna go, you really need a supermajority of folks to pledge for any kind of substantial project. So your rental income, again, is about 35% of your budget, and construction will impact that income. And you can, you know, have a plan, whether you do a bridge loan, or you have a gift, or a couple of households, or 5 households that decide to help make up that, just for that 1 year, to help with that. You know, there's ways to plan to be able to get there. And then recommendations for you. So I would recommend that you do an additional ask for new gifts and stretch gifts. You can do a combined campaign, which I know that there's some thought from in the past, oh, we don't want to compete annual and capital. We definitely don't want to be competing. When you do a combined campaign, you can actually combine your energy together, and you have 2 separate, either you can have one 8.5 by 11 pledge form that has the annual pledge first and then the capital pledge second. And for those of you who have already given a gift and can give some more, you can have a spot to check for that. This is in addition to what I've already pledged for capital. But you just make clear that we don't want to take any money away from annual programs to give to capital, because if you build it, they may come, but they won't come back if you're not funding your programs, right? And so we know that we need to keep that integrity of the annual giving. So that can be made clear, and then actually it's an efficient, but again, connection process if you're getting those pledges through your stewardship conversations at the same time. And then, you know, once you figure out, when you've all stretched to the most of your capacity, you explore what financial package options, and I already talked to the finance gurus, and I know that Dave was going to be crunching some numbers about, you know, what kind of different packages you could put together for things, and more people too as well. Meg's probably going to work on that, and other folks. So if you put together the gifts that people are able to give, and again, when you were thinking about stretch giving, this is over a 3-year period, right? You don't have to give it all in 1 year. That's why it's over 3 years. Then you put those gifts together with a grant and a reasonable loan, and then you see, okay, where are we at now? What are our options? If for some reason you fall short of that, then you can do some additional discernment about what you can do with what is already some generous giving that has happened. But let's try first for that sanctuary, because that's what your vision is right now, is to build that. So, so those are my recommendations. And so big picture suggested timeline is investigate your spirit level grant and some loan options. Usually you have to talk to several banks if you're going to get a loan, and so that takes time and energy of your volunteers. And train your stewards in the winter and prepare for that additional ask, and also for your annual campaign at the same time. And then do a combined campaign in the winter, spring. I think you normally launch in February for your annual, is that correct? March, okay, yeah. March-ish. So you've got some time to get prepared for all of that. And then, if needed, explore additional options for campus, and you wrap your project around what your funding capacity is, knowing what kind of grant you can get, what kind of loan you can get, and what your gifts are when everybody is stretched on their giving. So, fall, having some town hall meetings for education and Q&A, and then having a recommendation to the congregation about what you're going to do, given all your good planning, and you've already done a ton of great planning. But this will be, you know, once you know more exactly what everybody's who can pledge has pledged, and everybody's stretched the most they can do in their pledge, then you have a congregational vote on whether to proceed to build your sanctuary, or if the recommendation is for something else, what that is, right? So as you heard from Reverend Sean, she was determined you were going to do something. So you will see what that is as you move through this process, right? So moving forward, be ambitious and practical for this legacy project. Again, this is something that you build for you now and for people coming after you to enjoy. And again, hold each other's hearts in your hands and listen attentively when people are expressing their joys and their concerns or their sorrow. these projects involve change and a lot of effort, and so we just wanna make sure you have that in mind as you proceed forward. There's a lot of people that'll be working really hard and have already worked really hard on this. So just wanna make sure that we're keeping that heart piece in it when we're doing this, the whole package. So when you've got your shared vision and your shared values and deeper connections, those all lead you to where you wanna go and to meet your goals as a congregation. So I just have some closing words for you, and then I'll take some questions if people have them. So make no little plans. Make big plans. Memorize, Steve, you're gonna have to get me through. They have no magic to stir the blood and will probably not be realized. Make big plans. Aim high in hope and work, remembering that long after we are gone, our work will continue to be a living thing. Remember that our children and grandchildren are going to do things that would stagger us. So make no little plans. All right, so that is what I have for you today. And so are there questions? I believe we have a roving named Mike called Betts. Betts is ready to take your questions. Anybody have any questions? Dave's got a question over there. You all are so calm and quiet, my goodness.
They put something in the food.
All right. It was yummy.
Fed them too well.
Yeah, it was delicious.
Yeah, I'm Dave Carlson, I chair of the endowment committee. Couple of questions. That is generally appropriately tied to the length of the asset being acquired.
Uh-huh.
And the burden on the operating budget is tied to that debt. And that relates to the amount of the debt, the term of the debt, and the interest on the debt.
Yes.
Can you comment on your experience of what the length of the debt that you typically see, the interest rate on the debt that you typically see, and then other terms and conditions related to the debt?
Okay. So since you already have this property here as to be backup, it's harder to get a loan if you don't have an asset already, right? So you have this asset to back up the loan. I did my calculation based on a 20-year loan at the 5-year treasury rate plus 3%, because that's what the UUA website has if you were going to get a loan from them. And so they have 3 different loan terms depending on your type of project, and your project fits within their 20-year one. So you can do your calculation on different ones, and you might decide you want a 30-year loan or you want a 10-year loan or something. I'm not a huge fan of the adjustable rate mortgages for obvious reasons. But that's what I did my calculations on. So you're correct; those are all interrelated, Dave.
So a second question. One.
Yep, you're on.
Yeah. A second question then, have you seen endowment funds used to support the debt with special terms and conditions, like interest only for the first 2 years and then a payoff in 18? Again, the assumption is, I think our assumption is, that there will be growth. You look around, even with the town hall, we're almost 80%. And therefore, the burden on the operating budget, and we certainly don't want to take away from program, absolutely. But do you ever see situations where an endowment debt is either at a lower rate for the first few years? I mean, the endowment committee could loan the congregation $400,000 at 2% if we wanted to. Have you seen the manipulation of those kinds of numbers in support of an aggressive building schedule like the one we're anticipating.
Absolutely, so I will say that rather than manipulative, I would say that's just creative use, right? So yes, as long as you pass the IRS smell test, if you will, what's a real interest rate, and it doesn't have to be high, right? So it has to be above a certain amount. So your resident CPA or an outside CPA, can tell you what that is. In my congregation, of course, we have a CPA, as you do, and they told us what that rate was. We didn't borrow from our endowment, but we did do some bridge loans at that lower rate. So and then paid those back. So that's the key. You really want to do it with the intent to pay it back, and as long as you have an interest rate that's not going to be a problem from a tax standpoint, that is fine.
I will say also that Troop Memorial Church, that they gave us that $15,000 loan. They gave it to us as interest only for the first 2 or 3 years, and then asked us to pay $1,000 a year after that. So yeah.
Yeah, so you can do, as long as you don't run afoul of the IRS, then you can do what you feel like fits within the intent of your endowment and helps you get where you want to go.
Other questions?
I have 2 questions, and I'm not sure if you're the person or someone from the church. For people who have pledged to the campaign, are we adjusting the timelines for year 1 of that to begin? Because I know people have counted on their RMDs from their retirement accounts, and this is sort of messing around with that. And number 2 is, do we have, since there will be a decision time in late 2020, has anybody, I know we don't know what we're doing for sure, but do we have any projected timelines for moving forward with the project? I personally need to have something in my head to answer those 2 questions.
Anybody here like to answer?
So Tom may want to answer, and I'll just give my overview of that. So that recommended timeline is my suggested timeline. So you already have a building fund, a sanctuary fund, where there's funds in there. So your RMD can still come before the end of this year, if that's part of the way that you want to do that. And for the RMD, that's the required minimum distribution for folks that are 70 and a half or older. And the benefit of that is that income can come directly to the church, and it doesn't count as income to you. So it's a great way to give if you are in that category. The board and the church can make some different decisions about the timeline. You could decide to do some sort of a campaign this fall, but we're already at the end of September. And so anyway, there are options that we can discuss, but Tom can talk about the timeline for after when the building starts.
If I can just add one thing to that, there may be people who want to have a more clear picture before they put their money in the fund.
Yes, that's right, and so that's part of what that
That's a
timeline
big
is to
decision.
build the clear picture so that when you're voting on it, you're clear on what you're giving to, absolutely.
So, it's a little difficult to answer.
I understand.
But I think a question that is probably outstanding for a number of people who are using their R&D to fund their pledge is, to a great extent, this year. What do you do this year? A number of people have already done what they can or will do with their R&D. But some people may need to be thinking, well, I'm gonna do it before the end of the year because we have to, or it doesn't count. And in fact, if you don't take your R&D, there are substantial penalties for not doing it. So, my advice would be, if you've made a pledge to the campaign currently, that if you've not made a payment this year, that you go ahead and do it with your R&D and have that done. If you've made a pledge and you used your R&D for other purposes, then you may wanna wait until after the first of the year if you're looking for timing kinds of issues. One of the discussions we've had with the property use group, and we're trying to imagine every possible scenario out there. So I can tell you that certainly this group is in favor of moving forward with a new sanctuary. Exactly what that looks like, how big it is, we're not sure of any of that. But we are moving ahead with the intention that there will be a new sanctuary. If something were to happen that we totally fail at this, and I think that's highly unlikely, but if that were to happen, then we have to make a decision. What about the pledges that have been made? What about the pledges that have actually been paid? What do we do about that? And I think in good faith, we would end up offering people refunds on it and make them whole once again if we weren't able to do what we said we were going to do, and people gave under those on that basis. Now, I know this weekend, yesterday we talked to Kay a little bit about what happens when people have made pledges or have made actual contributions, and they've had to change the plan. What has traditionally happened in other congregations, and Kay, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. Well, as part of the process, sometimes congregations do have to wrap their available funding from a variety of sources around their project and figure out what they can do with it. And so then they investigate what the options are, and then the property use group typically makes a recommendation to the board about what their recommended option would be after looking at some options, and then the board usually makes a recommendation to the congregation, and the congregation votes on that. So you know, I usually folks are amenable to when they see what investigation and due diligence has gone into what the options are, decide to go with that. But you know, in particular circumstances, if there's a radical change that doesn't feel like it's within the original intent, then the church can decide, you know, to do what Tom just talked about. I haven't seen that happen though in any of the projects that I worked on.
I've worked for just someone on the board or who knows that is, because this is not a brand new discussion. I remember, you know, what, 30 years ago still looking at where we wanted to go as a congregation, very positive to move forward, larger congregation, and we did move here, so that was a growth. But I'm just curious, particularly over the last 5 years, what has been the percentage of growth that we've had? And I don't know what our current real membership is, and so I'd like to do that, and then I guess as a follow-up, if we were looking just at a 5% membership growth, and we haven't had that, without reaching that now, which has been kind of our, I think, intent, how are we gonna get there? And so, anyone who can answer that, I appreciate it.
And I'll just
I
pipe
can
in
try.
before Reverend John, just really quick. So what was reported to the UUA in January of this year was 126 certified members and 66 friends. That adds up to 192. So we know for a variety of reasons people aren't joiners, but they're supporters of the congregation. So that's just one figure, but Reverend John, please speak to
Yeah,
that.
no, we haven't grown since I've been here, which is, you know, we've been trying. And I think some of it honestly is the space where we're at that 80%. We haven't, if you look at our attendance, it's been pretty straightforward, pretty flat for the last, you know, 5-6 years here, which a lot of people look at attendance. And when you think about the space, I think it does hold us back. There's lots of things that we're trying to do in order to try to grow. I think our RE program had a really big bump this year with the coming of age and program and the whole program that we had. We're doing a ton of programming right now where we've got literally almost half the congregation signed up for, which is almost unheard of. We usually only get about 20%. So I like to think that we will be. but I think that some of that is gonna be the building. I think, I've heard from new people that it takes a little while to kind of get into the congregation because they walk in and they go, it's like a meeting house, like it doesn't feel as much like a church, and I think that's a challenge. But yeah, I think it is a challenge that we're gonna face. I know that, our forebears in 1953, 1956, they were only about 50 people when they started, and they grew from there too. So once they build that church in particular.
This is just a quick point of order. What is a certified member? I mean,
What is a certified member?
certified friend?
So,
Certified friend.
right, so in the past, and I'll sort of put this in a humorous way, hopefully, but, so you have to certify every year in January, by the end of January, as a congregation to the UUA, how many members that you have and how many friends that you have, and you have to pay dues on how many members you have. They've switched over to a different model as a percentage of your budget, now, but, so you have, it depends on the congregation, but oftentimes there's a conversation about, well, who really we haven't seen in 5 years, but they're an emeritus member, or they're a regular member, or, attending, or, they've been here so long, they have lifetime membership or whatever. So, and different congregations have different thresholds, like, are you a pledging member, a voting member, and so then we're going to certify that to the UUA that you're in our numbers, or are you a friend because you're not a pledging member, or there's many pledging friends at congregations I go to, so just because you're a friend doesn't mean you're not pledging, but traditionally it was a way for them to keep track of what the dues were, but then also just to see how big your congregation is and, what's going on there, and kind of to track that.
So does that mean that those certified friends are all, are in our church's definition of certified friends, are they pledging persons? Or some are and some aren't, but it's just.
Some are, some aren't.
Some are and some aren't.
Captured.
Right, and sometimes churches have people who are certified members who aren't pledging. So right now you have 95 pledging households, right? So if you have 2 or more people in a household, there's 1 pledge coming from that. So out of that 192 total, you have 95 pledging households.
Yeah, 2 comments. One, within 10 days, I'll have a funding model built, which I will circulate to the finance committee. The other issue is if somebody is actually moving cash into the sanctuary fund, that cash will hit the UUA special fund that's designated for sanctuary, not under the control of the stewards, but under the control of the congregation. And having worked with the UUA, it's a well-controlled, productive fund, so there's no danger of kind of our losing track of any cash that comes in prior to the actual spending. Did that make sense?
Sure.
We also have a truly rockin' VP of Finance who follows everything like a fine-tooth comb.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Sean.
For sure, the church that is renting Suite 5 are going to be impacted with this project. I am assuming that the board have talked to them and make some arrangement. To me, I think they are very nice, very responsible, nice people, nice church. Then, anyway, I don't want to talk more, but I assume you have done that.
I will say, yes, they've had conversations, but Tom has some more to say about that.
So the Christian Science Church, which is in Suite 5, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Christian Science Church that's in Suite 5, we've had a conversation a couple months ago, actually. We didn't want to have them hear unofficially that, hey, you're thinking about tearing their building down and they're going to have to do something. So we wanted to alert them that we have this project, that we're starting to move ahead with it. We wanted them to know that the building wasn't coming down
around them anytime very soon, but that they had to begin thinking about it. To be perfectly honest, we also wanted to put it in their head that they've got a pretty nice deal here. This is a neighborhood that they've been in for many, many years. They would probably like to stay in this neighborhood for a long time, and we would like them to stay here, and we would like them to financially help us do that. Now, we've not had a deep conversation about that yet with them, but it will happen.
Well, does that mean, were they to stay here, does that mean they would use our new sanctuary, or does it mean, or these pit possibilities, like they could renovate some of those rooms over there and turn it also into their space? Oh, okay.
Well, I'll say this, the property use group is exploring all options. Let's just leave it at that. We don't know what they will or will not do, but they are exploring all options.
Any other questions? If not, I bet there's still dessert in the kitchen over there.
And the kitchen.
And the
back
kitchen
there.
here, there's 2 spots for dessert, so ready, set, go.
Help yourselves, we don't want to take it home.
That's right, and good ending because childcare just ended, so. we have kids.
Uh-huh.
Oh, Deborah
There you
does
go.
have one final thing she'd like to say.
I just wanted to mention that if you haven't taken the survey, only 52 people have taken the survey. That's great, we have that many, but we have a lot more to whom it was sent. And Tom's gonna be
Yeah,
we're
we
gonna
can send it out again tomorrow.
send it out again tomorrow, from a blast.
And if it can be placed on the Facebook page, cause
Yes, I did.
you did, but
Yeah.
if we could place it one more time.
Place it on the
Sure, it's
Yeah, I
it's
can
on
do
our Facebook group, not on
Yeah.
our page, but on our.
Correct.
Yeah.
Facebook
Yeah.
group, so
Just post it again.
we really like.
Yeah, we don't want random people to take it, it's
About
only
these
on our
things,
group.
it just takes a few minutes, 5 questions, it takes a few minutes, so.
I mean, I left it on.
It was sent, I memorized this, it was sent on last Tuesday at 1:18 PM. And it came from, OCU, so you can find it there, but it will be sent again tomorrow.
Yeah. Can we give Kay a big welcome and thank you?